This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Ghannam.
And I'm Jamal Dajani.
Jamal, we just witnessed the much anticipated press conference between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu in the White House. And I have to say that this much anticipated peace in the Middle East plan was among the most bizarre, unbelievable displays of free association and irreality that I've witnessed probably in my lifetime. It was truly bizarre, filled with just falsehoods and lies and unbelievable distortions of reality. But this is the much anticipated peace plan. Now, they called it peace in the Middle East, but it's really about a ceasefire in Gaza. We're going to be talking about that today. But before we get to that, breaking news, we're going to watch an interview which bears on this because a lot has happened since our last show with the United Nations and the recognition of a Palestinian state. We're going to hear an interview that you did with Stanley Cohen. He's an attorney and political activist. He's going to talk about what happened at the United Nations this week by several countries and the legal implications to Israel, I think, and to the United States of these countries of the acknowledgement of a Palestinian state. There's a lot to cover, Jamal, so we got to get right to it.
You're absolutely right. Let's watch Stanley Cohen. A historic shift occurred in international diplomacy at the 80th United Nations General Assembly, with many Western countries, including several G7 members, formally recognizing a Palestinian state. The total number of countries recognizing Palestine is now 157 of the 193, or 81% of UN member states. Also, the General Assembly overwhelmingly approved a non-binding New York Declaration endorsing a two-state solution. The declaration received 142 votes in favor, with only 10 votes against. This symbolic support will do little to stop Israeli aggression on the ground, and some see it as a diversion from the critical need to end Israel's aggression and hold many of its officials accountable for war crimes they have been indicted for. However, some think that recognizing Palestine's sovereignty does not include ending Israel's impunity, but see it as an additional tool that could bolster international efforts to do so. Joining us on Arab Talk this week is human rights attorney and activist Stanley Cohen to discuss how this could be realized. Welcome back to Arab Talk, Stanley.
Thank you. It's an honor to be invited and participate in this great show once again. Thank you.
Let me begin by asking you, how do you view the outcome of this latest UNGA meeting in New York? Was it a win for Palestine, a defeat for Israel, and its few supporters, or both?
Well, I think any analysis of what occurred at the UN and what's occurred the last several months is very optimistic when it comes to making a popular film for audiences across the world. It empowers people momentarily. It gives them a moment of feeling good from the safety of the United Nations, from the safety of 10 Downing Street, from the safety of the Royal Palace in France. But at day's end, unless and until these nations, these states, independent of these so-called advisory votes and these non-binding votes of support or against Israeli genocide, until these states start ending the arming, the economic joint development projects, the funding of Israeli genocide in both Gaza and increasingly in the West Bank, it's just feel good. There are vehicles at hand that cooperating states can participate with and further to provide true meaning for this. Now, much of the global South, because we remain basically a world controlled by 5 white nations in the Security Council, doesn't have the power in and of themselves to really impose the kinds of justice, equality, and peace that is necessary for Palestine. Although much of the global south does have what are known as universal jurisdiction, which provides them an opportunity to seek arrest warrants, to detain Israelis and soldiers, and to prevent businesses and political leaders from coming to their shores to visit, to open new contracts, to open new businesses, and to permit people to join the military services of Israel. So we have this tension between the Hollywood feel good. And when I say the Hollywood feel good, I'm not referring to this overwhelming support in the industry of Hollywood in support of Gaza and Palestine and in opposition to Israeli genocide, but I'm talking about the feel good filmmaking that we in the West have had this romantic inclination with for generations now. So there are available rules and laws and procedures by which we can turn, or they can turn, rhetoric into reality, that can turn cries of pain into punishment for those that promote it, but I've yet to see it.
Well, let me ask you, you recently tweeted, and I'm quoting here, before recognizing the state of Palestine, it was legal for British nationals to join the IOF. Now, under the Foreign Enlistment Act of 1870, it's an offense for British nationals to enlist in the military of a foreign state that is at war with another state with which the UK is at peace with. Please explain.
Sure. This is an archaic law that has. I've done some research since the Post, and keep in mind, I'm not a barrister or solicitor. I've done some work, and I'm doing some work in the UK right now, but it's not my specialty. But just from an international law standpoint, doing some research, I came across the Foreign Enlistment Act of 1870, which by its statutory intent was designed to maintain neutrality in combat between states that it supports and recognizes and that it's not at war with. It not only involves or not only includes precluding citizens of the UK from going to fight with foreign states that they against other states that they are at peace with, but it prevents providing economic development, helping to support navies, helping to end expeditions and financial support. Now, clearly, prior to the recognition of Palestine as a state, it had no relevance. And in fact, 2 years ago, there was some attempt in the parliament to discuss it and to enforce it, and that was the conclusion. But now that the UK has formally recognized the existence of a state of Palestine, it is clear to me, in reviewing the amendments that have taken place as recently as 20, 25 years ago, it applies. And under this law, you can't apply it retroactively. You can't look back at the thousands of so-called dual citizens, Zionists, British Jews that have gone to the IOF and engaged in genocide. You can't apply it for yesterday. But they are now on notice that going forward, if you continue to join the IOF, if you continue to provide military support, and that just doesn't mean picking up a gun. It could also deal with, technical assistance, consulting work, engineering work, becoming part of the military-industrial complex. It is a violation of UK law. It is a crime. So I am hoping that not only will Parliament take this up, and by the way, part of that should now be to issue notice directly to every British member who is in the IOF, to every British person who is supporting the IOF, that going forward, if you continue to do this, it's a crime. Once they've received notice, just like those investors that continue to support Israel after an ICC indictment for genocide can be held accountable, so too can British nationals be held accountable for supporting the genocide, not just the genocide, overtly. Just going to sit in an office in Tel Aviv to provide technical assistance is a violation of the Neutrality Act. The UK is not alone there. Although it's a little different in reach, Canada has a similar law. Australia has a similar law. It's interesting that you tend to see these both among states that were renowned for neocolonial projects, such as the UK, or geocolonial projects, and also indigenous states that were traumatized by colonial empires in the past. They have tried to set up this wall of neutrality that says we're trying to maintain a community of safety, of justice, of interaction without supporting the maniacal or military aims of other countries, even those that we may be in agreement with in general. And if you do so, if you violate it, it's a violation of our law and you can be prosecuted.
Would this be, by extension, apply to raising money for this purpose? There is a lot of fundraising for the Israeli military with nonprofit status, often abused to increase donations. I'll give you an example, which you've mentioned, Canada. The Canada Revenue Agency has recently revoked the charitable status of the Jewish National Fund of Canada and the Nieman Foundation. The action was based on the organization's failure to comply with Canadian charity law, which prohibits the use of funds for foreign military activities and projects in illegal settlements. Could the recognition of Palestine be used as a tool to go after the organizations in the UK, in Australia, and other countries that are engaged in fundraising for the Israeli military and Israeli settlements?
Well, not only that, when the ICC issued its indictment and its arrest warrant for Netanyahu and others, I said at the time, and it holds true, and I've begun to see it in the United States, that its power, without putting Netanyahu in handcuffs and in a prisoner's suit and in a dock, is that it put notice, it gave notice to not-for-profits in the United States and elsewhere that this man, this government, this state is engaged in genocide. And now that you are specifically on notice, if you continue to fund illegal settlements, if you continue to provide monies for war crimes, if you continue to support through politics and propaganda, manipulation of the public discussion, this genocide and this deadly military state, you too are crossing the line and are in theory susceptible for prosecution for conspiracy and genocide after the fact. In fact, I've had discussions with several colleagues, lawyers that involve NGOs or not-for-profits in the United States, and I've told them, if I were you, I would go to my clients. Kirshner, I look at the president's son-in-law as the perfect example of this not-for-profit, and I would say, you've got to stop this, because you are now on notice that you are funding an entity that is engaged in genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. And now that you are on notice, you can't just close your eyes and say, who knew? So yes, the recognition of the state of Palestine and the indictment by the ICC, the findings by the ICJ, the recent findings by the United Nations, and the overwhelming vote by the General Assembly is clear notice to those people in the past who, with closed eyes, they claimed, with a lack of knowledge, they argued, not being aware of what was actually going on, were sending billions and billions and billions of tax-exempt dollars into Israel for use in genocide or as a backup to subsidize the infrastructure of the state so that it could shift monies that it otherwise would have to use for the infrastructure into 2,000-ton bombs, into the use of phosphorus, into attacks in Lebanon, into attacks in Yemen, into attacks in Syria. So people are on notice. So the more that the world community gathers and says we recognize, the more problematic it becomes. But yet, reality says it is one thing to say, I recognize you. It is another thing to say, under international law, I will support you. There is nothing that stops a state that recognizes another state from reaching out and saying, would 20,000 of our workers on the ground help to support you? Would providing food and medicine and cross-border support help you as a state, as a sister and brother state? So there are steps that these countries that say we recognize you can take that not only makes it more complicated for Israel in its genocide, but is a fundamental humanitarian code that dates back to the 1860s and the U.S. Civil War.
So does this recognition apply to, war crimes that go years back since the establishment of the state? Does it absolve people? I mean, recognition is one thing, but the non-recognition, does it absolve you from committing all these war crimes?
No, ignorance is no excuse. One of the defenses at Nuremberg was who knew, and it didn't work. It worked for some because the evidentiary showing at the tribunal did not establish the kinds of overt acts that put people on notice. So while there were propagandists, for example, in the Nazi army that were found guilty and some even executed because they intentionally and systematically and knowingly and willfully furthered the Nazi propaganda, there were others that were not held accountable because that was not their role or their position. So it's a fine line between ignorance is no defense, and yet what I did was consistent with my work in general. It was not intended by any means to overtly further what was going on. From a legal standpoint, yes, retroactively, as new laws come out and as new laws is triggered and as increasing numbers of states recognize Palestine, there can be some retroactive application. But my view of this reaching back into the deck for the Ariel Sharons that are still living is it's not necessary. If we really want to support human rights, international law, protect the Palestinian people, not just of Gaza and the West Bank, but people in the diaspora community that are being targeted, for example, by ICE. I've had clients that have called me. They've had recent visits by federal law enforcement, putting people on notice that if you continue this same course of conduct, we will come for you. And when I say come for you, I don't mean a la Israeli. I don't mean SS or ICE come for you. I mean there's judicial process. Unfortunately, in the United States right now, there is no judicial process whatsoever unless you're a white Christian male. But yes, to go back to your fundamental question, what has occurred for 100 years on the ground in Palestine goes to state of mind. It's admissible as evidence. Goes to intent. It's admissible as evidence. Goes to a course of conduct. It's admissible as evidence. A pattern. It's all admissible as to evidence. So for those organizations in Israel, for those entities in Israel, for those people involved in the government and have been for decades at this point, the defense of I did not know is meaningless. You not only knew, but you played an overt, a witting, and a willing role in systematic genocide. And I think what I'd like to point out is, because I've had this debate forever, as you know, I've been involved in Palestine self-determination and resistance as an attorney for more than 30 years. The genocide did not begin on October 8th. Genocide has been going on since the criminal terrorist Ergun Stern-Gan Haganah, the Palmach, 100 years ago, this European colonial project arrived and started slaughtering people, raping people, destroying communities, displacing people. There are different variations of genocide. Zionists like to argue, well, there's been an increase in population, or how many people died. Body counts have nothing to do with genocide. The core of genocide is intent. What is your purpose? What is your aim? What is your hope? And on that level, Netanyahu and his co-Kabbalists have made it very clear. Their intent is to completely remove, eradicate, and ethnically cleanse all of Palestine. It's been their intent, whether it was Sharon, whether it was Begin, whether it's Netanyahu, and that's why it's been genocide for 100 years. What we've seen the last 2 years has made it more difficult for the West, especially the global North, to say, who knew? Our heads are in the sand as they see children die of starvation, as they see hospitals bombed, as they see communities leveled, as someone like Blair now begins to talk about, well, I'm going to be appointed the Grand Master in the reconstruction for the Gulf states. And then Trump will have his casino. This fantasy, this craziness is clear for the world to see. So when it comes to the issue of intent, what did you know? What did you see? And what did you willingly do? These Zionists and their supporters can no longer say we had no idea.
Talking about Netanyahu, dozens of officials and diplomats staged a walkout as Benjamin Netanyahu took to the podium, leaving large parts of the UNGA conference hall empty, while outside protesters against Israel's genocide in Gaza gathered in Times Squares. Yet, he goes on stage, he repeats that Israel would not allow a Palestinian state to exist and went on to rebuff the conclusion of a UN Commission of Inquiry that Israel had committed genocide in Gaza, claiming the charge was baseless. My question is, does anyone actually believe him, including countries that support Israel?
Oh, I don't think anyone believes him. I think this is a power equation. I think that politicians and political machineries of those states that continue to support him love the fact that they have a foothold in the Middle East, love the fact that they have an assassin that works for them and with them, love the fact that they have the ability to maintain a presence in the region, not from 8,000 miles or 10,000 miles away, but from on the ground. So even they know very clearly what is going on. They don't believe them. They know it's the same craziness. It's just a different iteration of the lunacy of Trump. The earth is flat. I can say what I want. I can draw all the pictures I want. I can make all the claims I want. And then I can walk away and smile and laugh. They understand that. This is all part of the desperate power equation of the West to maintain, to some degree, a foothold in the Middle East because of its resources, because of its where it stands in the world, because of its potential political power, because of the competition with other international powers to get a foothold and to get some control of the region. That's what it's about. I don't know of anyone who was informed. I don't know of anyone who is educated. I don't know of anyone who is experienced. I don't know of anyone who has not been asleep for the last 30 years in particular, who can stand up and say, yes, Netanyahu, we believe you. It's nonsense. The world's, but it's the same thing as with Trump. I just keep saying the world is flat, the world is flat, and people, whether they believe it or not, they like the way I say it, so they let me get away with it. And that's the way it is with Netanyahu. There is not a person in the world today with open eyes who has observed, who is looking, who is watching, who is informed, can sit back and accept a word that this war criminal of decades is spewing to the rest of the world.
There is a recent article on CNN's website entitled "From Diplomacy to Soccer, Israel is Becoming a Pariah on the Global Stage." This is unusual for a network like CNN to promote such a headline. The political, economic, and cultural backlash to Israel has sparked comparisons to the pressure placed on South Africa during the era of apartheid racial oppression. Has Israel reached South Africa's inflection point?
It reached it 40 years ago. Now, let's not forget that the last state to walk away from South Africa was Israel. Let's not forget that to the very end, Israel was providing weapons to South Africa in exchange for uranium for its nuclear program. Israel passed the depravity, the evil, the hate, the death, the destruction. It's Soweto 7 days a week, every day, and has been for 27,000 days. It's well past that area. I'm not minimizing the outrage of South Africa, but the world reached a point where, with open eyes and with somewhat of a heart, it said we can no longer accept South Africa, what's going on. I believe the world is reaching that point. I believe that to the very end, though there may be 4 or 5 states in the Security Council and a dozen other states that have natural resources and weapons and business contracts with Israel, the world has reached a point where it understands this can't go on. And the way that they put an end to it is by not permitting Israelis to come to their country, by not permitting their country members to engage in economic relationships with Israeli companies or with the state of Israel, by making sure that Israeli government leaders know that if you come to our country, you're going to be arrested, by initiating universal jurisdiction prosecutions for war crimes, and by moving in every way that they can to basically let the rest of the world, if the Security Council of the United Nations is going to keep vetoing laws or resolutions that support and further international law, maybe we need to begin to look elsewhere in terms of our developing as a new world that is coming to life now. The UN, it's no longer the ash heap of Germany post-World War II. It's no longer where the world was looking to 4 or 5 states to ultimately be the arbiters. It's reached a point generation after generation with the liberation of nations in the global South, with the growth of communities, with political development, with the search for international relationships based upon equality and justice, There's a more active, vibrant world, particularly in the global South. And I think that is changing. And yes, despite all the horror, despite the genocide, despite the pain and suffering, I think the clock is ticking. And I think the world has reached a point where it will no longer accept Israel the way it's been the nation state.
Well, Netanyahu himself has stated that Israel is becoming increasingly isolated. In reaction to this, in the United States, its supporters are using coercive measures to protect its image and influence in the United States. On his visit, Netanyahu met with Zionist influencers to underscore how critical gaining control over social media platforms was for Israel to dominate the narrative. He referenced Larry Ellison and other supporters' pending acquisition of TikTok as vital to smother pro-Palestinian posts. Are such naked plays to eliminate dissent an indicator of desperation, or are they going to work?
Well, yes, and they also dictate an age-old and now outdated arrogance. It's like Goebbels. It's like Nazi Germany. It's like we're going to control the airways, we're going to control the newspapers, we're going to control the radios, we're going to control the parades, we're going to control the books, and we'll sell our song. And eventually, and Israel's done it, they decided it doesn't matter. We'll just murder people en masse. So this effort now to control social media, this effort to try to manipulate the youth, the next generation, is not just stupid and counterproductive, but doomed to fail. We have a world of Gen Z, young women and men, although this manosphere is disturbing, this white Christian young male environment that seems to take hold in the United States. We have a world of young women and men that are sophisticated, that are educated, that are informed. They do not accept the Israeli narrative. And whether it's TikTok or Twitter or Facebook or Meta or whatever it may be, Israel can pound its chest through Greenblatt and the ADL and through Zionist billionaires in the United States and scream victim, victim, victim. It no longer works. Sooner or later, the truth, the pain, the anguish, the suffering, and the genocide came to the surface. It's here to stay, no matter what Israel tries to do with its propaganda, with its narrative. It's very much like Netanyahu comes and preaches to an empty hall. So, okay, Ellison and others will preach to millions of people. They're not going to buy it. They're not going to accept it. You cannot hide the horror of Gaza. You cannot hide the horror of the occupied West Bank. You cannot hide the horror of what's going on to immigrant communities worldwide. No matter how it's repackaged, no matter how much the story is manipulated and twisted into a falsehood, you can't swallow reality. That's what South Africa learned. That's what Israel is learning right now.
I've mentioned in the introduction that the General Assembly, there was an overwhelming approval of a non-binding New York Declaration endorsing a two-state solution. It seems like every time the issue of Palestine comes forward, countries start talking about the two-state solution, repeating, that whole idea of the two-state solution. Is this just a feel-good statement that they make? I mean, is there any intention behind it, or is it just to kind of put a lid and kind of add some opium to the masses to kind of calm down and say, oh, we're going to give you a state. There's the two-state solution.
Well, it's not only feel-good, it's Plan B. The two-state solution, as it is contemplated, is little more than de jure Bantustans. It's little, as long as Israel can control the air, the water, the land rights of what comes in, what goes out, who comes in, who goes out, raids when it wishes to raid. The two-state solution is simply Soweto. It's simply the world saying we now recognize what's been a reality for occupied Palestine for 100 years, but we say you're a state. As you know, I have never been a supporter of the two-state solution. I think it's feel-good. I think it's nonsense. I think it will simply send this death, this destruction, this manipulation, this control to another generation, kick it down the road. This two-state solution that is that's feel-good for the UK, for Canada, for 50 or 60 or 100 other states, builds into existence the kind of racial, cultural, and religious superiority that existed in South Africa, where you had black communities and you had white communities. You had white communities that controlled what black communities could do. And sure, you can call it a state all you want. But until a group of people, until a state has the ability to determine its own fate, to determine what it wishes to be, how it wishes to be, and where it wishes to go, it's not a state. It's simply a surrogate. The one state so-called solution I have proposed for over 30 years, one state, no religious superiority, no formal state religion, the capital of Quds, no laws that favor one group as opposed to another, until you have that type of situation. Now, you may end up having to have cantons for a generation, the way you had in Switzerland, where there are communities that are disproportionately Palestinian, communities that are disproportionately Israeli, or et cetera, and that get together and vote. But until you have one state with one capital, with no religion, no faith, and no laws exalted to the benefit of one, to the exclusion of others, all you are doing is kicking the proverbial can down the road. And in this case, that means more death, more destruction, more suffering for Palestinians, with the aim of Netanyahu, with the aim of Trump, with the aim of most of the West to see it go away.
Well, another important statement that was issued this week is President Trump saying that he won't permit Israel or Netanyahu to annex the West Bank. And I think he repeated that answer twice. The West Bank has more than 800,000 Israeli settlers in it. So how would that unfold? I mean, it's practically annexed.
Annexation is a state of mind. It's reality that you have to deal with. It is a difference without a distinction. To say, quote, we are annexing it, we own you, we control you, we dictate life and death, we take what we want, versus doing it anyway without saying annexation. There's no difference. So yes, Trump gets up there and says, I will not allow you to annex the West Bank. Meanwhile, with every passing day, another 100, 200, 500, 1,000 Palestinians are picked up in political sweeps. More illegal settlements are drawn in. More crops are destroyed. More animals are murdered. More schools, Palestinian schools, are closed. So the notion that the danger is formal annexation is a red flag. It's a red herring. It doesn't mean anything, because day by day by day, what started out with 10,000, then 100,000, then 500,000, now 1 million illegal settlers will just continue to march on unless and until the world community says that's it. And when I say that's it, I'm not talking about the status quo. Just the way, there's this myth about what happened to the original Zionist occupiers in Gaza. The myth is it's a combination that they decided to leave. Yes, they were purchased out. Yes, they were also driven out by armed struggle. But the reality of it is, at that particular time, they had to be moved. They had to be gone. They had to be expelled. Until there's such time as these, and I'm not naive. I don't think tomorrow 900,000 Zionists and Jews that are occupying the West Bank are going to disappear. But I suspect if a lot of money gets thrown that way, if alternatives are provided, you're going to need to have hundreds of thousands of illegal settlers leave. And for those Zionists, for those Jews who say, I must be here because I must go onto the hilltop to talk to my God, you can go on the hilltop to talk to your God, as you've done forever with your brothers and sisters who are Palestinians on Palestinian land, as guests, as visitors, and as homeowners. But the notion of settlers, of 800,000, 1 million going to 1.2 or 3, it's got nothing to do with annexation. It's words. The reality on the ground is that while the world has been sleeping, Israel has taken up a different level of genocide, violence, theft, and injury to the people of the West Bank than they've done in Gaza.
Stanley Cohen, thank you as usual for coming on Arab Talk and sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's a great show. I always look forward to sitting down and talking with your great questions and a great audience.
That's the voice in the face of Stanley Cohen. He's an attorney and political activist discussing the implications for Israel and other countries to the recognition of a Palestinian state by several countries at the UN this last week. I mean, I think the most important thing is that when we talk about the recognition of a Palestinian state, we had talked about last week, Jamal, about some of the kind of downsides of that recognition in terms of does it really make any difference? But what Stanley Cohen is talking about is that it may have some real implications for Israel, as well as some of the supporters of Israel later on down the line.
Well, it's kind of funny because we had the interview with Stanley Cohen, and then we waited to record our show until we listened to the press conference, which was postponed for an hour or so. And in that press conference, and when Netanyahu started speaking, one of the points that he made, he wants to end what he called the lawfare on Israel, and basically the ICC charges against him and Israelis and other war criminals. And that's I think it's a very important point, because that's what Stanley Cohen was saying. Now with the recognition of a Palestinian state, even though, maybe some people might think this is a nominal recognition, since it's not, it still does not have its total independence, let's say, from Israel, but they do have special privileges at the United Nations, privileges with those countries that recognize it. For example, fundraising for the Israeli military, or having, for example, British soldiers going and serving in the Israeli military and committing war crimes there. So, and one of the things is now he's talking about, he wants to kind of lift all these basically legal actions that the state of Palestine can take against Israel, like wipe everything clean, like everything, all the killing, everything else that we've done, all the genocide, wipe that genocide word clean, take it out and start all over again. But let's talk about actually the so-called peace in the Middle East.
It was really bizarre.
When President Trump was talking about introducing it, I was like on pins on needles, like waiting to hear some exciting new announcement. I didn't hear that.
There's no breaking news here, Jamal.
Because it sounded like you're going to have peace in the Middle East and ending all hostilities, a free Palestinian state or an independent Palestinian state, and perhaps some peace agreements with Arab and Muslim countries. But they want all of this except the Palestinian state, because I haven't heard about the Palestinian states. That comes maybe later on. And maybe the press conference did not reflect all the 21 points that were distributed to the media about what the plans were, or they were abbreviated, and there was a delay because he didn't want to make Netanyahu feel bad or look bad or force him to do something. But one thing I know that happened is Trump forced Netanyahu to apologize to Qatar.
Yeah.
That didn't
right.
come, and he gave him, I would say Trump is good at praising people and whatever, make them feel when he wants to, and he can put down people when he wants to. But he tried to praise Netanyahu that he made this bold step. But in reality, let's face it, Netanyahu didn't want to make that call, because even when the news of that call were leaked or purposely leaked, his allies in the Israeli government were criticizing him, like, why did you do that for? Because he's basically admitting that he did something wrong, which was wrong.
Exactly.
Attacking a sovereign country. But that's Netanyahu for you. When he's put in a corner, he'll do that, and then he will change his mind later on, because in reality, there was a precedent to this, and the precedent is when Netanyahu tried to assassinate Khalid Mish'al in Jordan, and his assassins and his Mossad spies were caught. He was forced to fly to Jordan and apologize to basically get them released. And also he released from jail the Sheikh Ismail Yassin, who he later assassinated. So that tells you, don't trust anything that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to tell you.
Can we just look at the big picture for a minute, Jamal? Because the big picture from this press conference, much anticipated, but nothing really said, no real substance. We didn't hear them talk about the complete 21 points. It is getting pitched as peace in the Middle East. But really, the details about what's going to happen in terms of the genocide in Gaza, the starvation of a civilian population, children literally starving to death each day, and not enough aid getting in, barely any aid getting in to feed the, over 2 million Palestinian civilians. We didn't hear any details about this. All we heard was bluster. We understand, and I think you correctly pointed out, that this puts Netanyahu in a deep corner. I mean, he feels deeply cornered. He doesn't know what to do yet. I mean, he's deeply unpopular among most Israelis, not all, certainly, but most Israelis. But I want to come back to this point. This says nothing about a real Palestinian state. That we don't know what's going to happen in reality to Gaza. They kept talking about what greatness is going to come, and the way Trump talked about it, this most beautiful piece of real estate in the Middle East. How disgusting that Trump is talking about that in the midst of a genocide right now. But I have to say, it was truly a bizarre press conference. What did you get from this bizarreness for over 30 minutes?
Well, I mean, I read the 21-point plan, and some of it was discussed, but also I paid attention mostly to President Trump, not Netanyahu. I mean, I heard Netanyahu because I don't know what he's going to say. But let's summarize it. Basically, what they're saying, they're putting an ultimatum, giving an ultimatum to Hamas to release the hostages within 72 hours. So we don't know, as we're talking about this, is this going to happen or not? Because if it doesn't happen, he's giving the green light to Benjamin Netanyahu to continue doing what he has been doing. And then there is a withdrawal phase, but there is a very minimal withdrawal phase after the release of the hostage, because even Benjamin Netanyahu said, we'll draw a little bit. And they also are going to keep a security buffer. So that was rejected before, and so we don't know the size of the security buffer. Where is that security buffer going to be? The other point that I understood was that Arab now and Muslim nations are going to be left to deal with Hamas and demilitarize the Gaza Strip. Because it has become their problem. So I'm asking, how's that going to happen? Is Hamas going to accept that?
Right.
Are they just going to invade Gaza? Are they going to allow, let's say, Egyptian, Qatari, even he mentioned Pakistan to go into Gaza and take control? And then this is the kicker, which we talked about it before, which is the Board of Peace, which Trump calls, and he's going to be the chair of it. And I was waiting for that moment. I said, did he get rid of all the other people? Because we kept hearing about Tony Blair. Well, apparently,
Tony Blair was
apparently not. So, but now, instead of him being at the head of it, Donald Trump is going to take his time to kind of manage that. In addition, with Tony Blair and some other Arab players, they weren't named. And then there is going to be a formation of a government made of Palestinians who are not, of course, Hamas. No role for Hamas in there. And no role for the Palestinian Authority, by the way, until they complete the reforms. And we didn't discuss, they didn't talk about what reforms,
right.
Trump also teased that Iran might join the Abraham Accord. I haven't heard anything from Iran. I'm waiting to hear their response. I mean, he teased wouldn't that be nice? And then, of course, I mentioned the apology to Qatar and having that conversation. And then we're going to have peace in the Middle East. I mean, fast forward. But then you hear Netanyahu, he was reserved, I mean, all these expectations that Donald Trump is good about painting a beautiful picture, I mean,
which he's done many
he's the
times. He's done that many times.
he's the ultimate salesman, and it sounded good. Peace in the Middle East, everybody comes together. Gaza is going to get rebuilt, and that's it, freeing all the hostages. But then Netanyahu comes and starts, patting himself on the shoulder. We have the best soldiers. We did this, we did that. And he doesn't want to show any sign of weakness. And he says, no, withdrawal is going to be nominal withdrawal. And we're going to keep a buffer zone. Doesn't talk about, and then he puts the list of his own demands, which includes basically he wants all the Arab and Muslim countries to kind of recognize Israel, basically, and drop any charges against Israel and against him personally at the International Criminal Court of Justice and so forth. Kind of wipe the slate clean with Israel, all this bad publicity, all these accusations. And I have to say, one thing Trump mentioned, that our allies are recognizing the Palestinian state. So you could see where he's coming from. I mean, in essence, Trump was coming, I think, from a position of strength because we don't know what happened inside that private meeting, telling him, listen, we cannot keep holding on indefinitely, basically protecting you're behind. Our allies, like the UK is more important to the United States than Israel. France is more important to the United States than Israel. All these countries are more important to the United States than Israel. Yet, we keep playing that cover for Israel. And how long is that going to last? So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I tell you, it's early for me to make judgment, but it doesn't look good.
But here's what we do know, Jamal. We're going to find out a lot of information will be leaked within the next, 24 to 48 hours. And then at the 72-hour mark, we will find something very dramatic, whether or not, because there was a report today that Hamas has not yet received formally the 21-point peace plan, ceasefire plan that had been put together. So, I mean, again, you and I have been around long enough where we've heard the bluster from Trump and frankly, from a lot of other people. Trump on a number of occasions has said, in fact, we're so close to peace in Gaza, ceasefire this. He said it a number of times. They've all failed miserably. I have to tell you that I'm skeptical deeply, which is no surprise to anybody. It's no surprise to you. I don't see this really happening. Do you? What do you think in terms of probabilities now of this actually happening? And what I'm talking about actually happening, will in fact Hamas release all of the hostages, those that are alive, those that are not? And will Israel really engage in a genuine ceasefire and let more aid in? Those are the two most critical items in terms of what's going to happen in the next 72 hours. And on the side here, which is really interesting globally, Jamal, with the flotilla that's coming, the Gaza flotilla that's coming into Gaza right now, that's sailing into Gaza right now, it has the protection of Spain and Italy. It has
Turkey.
And Turkey, military ships
Greece,
of Turkey,
and
Spain,
and Greece.
Italy, and maybe even Greece. I mean, the entire world has turned on Israel. I mean, there may be a ban at FIFA for, Israel being able to compete in the European section of international football, soccer. So, I mean, I'm just not feeling it, Jamal, as we say. If there's a vibe check, we say that these days, what's the vibe check? No matter how Trump played it in the White House and no matter how much pressure Netanyahu's under, I'm sorry, I don't see this changing in 48 to 72 hours.
Oh, I think you're absolutely correct, Jess. I mean, it's one thing to watch the press conference and the kind of feel-good moments of it. And
I didn't feel
well,
good,
there were some feel-good moments that were presented. And then we don't know all the details, what happened behind closed doors.
Right.
What are all the details in the 21 points? And you said something very important. The next 72 hours are very important because this whole discussion will be moot if we don't see any progress. And then Benjamin Netanyahu can go and say, see, we tried. Hamas failed to release the hostages and disarm and so forth. And then nothing is going to change. If Trump is able to pull it off, meaning really his job is to restrain Israel, because I believe even within the administration, and I'm not talking about political appointees, but I'm talking about career politicians and the military, etc. They're seeing that Israel is becoming a liability. When your own allies that you fought World War II with, are going in a different direction, saying we're going to recognize the state of Palestine, and we need to see an end to this occupation. Today, the British Labour Party voted to say that Israel is committing genocide, and they have a motion now in the British Parliament to ask the government to recognize that Israel is committing a genocide. We've talked about all the other organizations that said that Israel is committing a genocide, and that the UNGA meeting was a total fiasco for Israel. When most of the delegates walked out of the room.
Yeah, the majority walked out.
And all the countries that said that they were going to recognize Palestine did so, and some, by the way, the number rose from 10 to 11. And I can't believe that within the American government, within the administration, some who are advising the president are saying, listen, you got to do something about it. It can't go on business as usual. And he's such I would say he's such a good actor that he puts a spin on it and wants to make everybody feel good because he doesn't want to humiliate Netanyahu. He wants to praise the Qataris and the Arabs and the Saudis, and everybody is playing a role. But at the end of the day, he has to deliver on the goods. If he doesn't deliver on the goods,
Yeah, I just don't see it happening, Jamal. I don't see any incentive for Hamas to release any of the hostages without firm guarantees of a complete it's the minimum requirement that there be a complete cessation of all violence, a complete withdrawal of all military troops out of Gaza, and a resumption of aid. It's a no-brainer. And that wasn't discussed. And you're right, we still don't know what was said behind the scenes. But food, water, and medicine is not getting into Gaza. Hundreds of Palestinians are still being murdered every day. There's almost 1 million people in Gaza City, Jamal, that can't or won't leave Gaza City as the Israeli military is committing these war crimes, these genocidal war crimes in the middle of Gaza City right now. Call me whatever you want to call me. I just don't see how this is going to happen in 72 hours. I just don't see it. I don't see the Israelis changing. I don't see the geopolitics changing. People are absolutely kind of unequivocally condemning Israel at every single level of world civil society. So do people really think, okay, now that you've signed this peace deal, no more ICJ, no more ICC, we love Israel? That's never going to happen. It just is not going to happen. So I'm for one, really feel like what we're headed for is much of the same: starvation and genocide of Palestinian civilians in Gaza, annexation and theft of Palestinian land in the West Bank, and an attempt to ethnically cleanse, indigenous Palestinians. So I'm sorry, I'm not left with any feel good moment from listening to Trump and Netanyahu do their love dance.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. And the next 72 hours are going to be very important. You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.